Mm, Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Microsoft Azure Community User Group. This evening, we have two amazing speakers. We're going to talk about cloud infrastructure with AI and spec-driven development. So before we start, we can do some housekeeping. 1 minute. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So as code of conduct, all members of this group should follow this code of conduct. Be friendly and welcome to everyone. Be patient, be thoughtful, be respectful and inclusive, and always be open and curious. Always try to ask questions and to understand something and not to criticize. So for our agenda today, we have Anders AD, sorry I pronounced it wrong, is a Microsoft MVP and is full-time cloud junkie. And he's talking about building cloud infrastructure with AI and how to avoid disaster. So that's quite a good one to watch. And the second speaker will be Arina. I'll try to pronounce this, Shushenko. And she's a software engineer at Microsoft. She will be talking about spec-driven development and why spec matters more than prompt. And our next episode is the 21st of September. The speaker has not been announced yet. Just stay tuned for that. So we're going to have our notes talk about spec-driven development now. I'm just bringing her up. Hello.
Hello.
So before we dive into your session, do you want to just give us an overview for everyone what your session is about?
Yeah, sure. So today I'm going to cover about spec-driven development, why it's different from AI assistant development, basically vibe coding. And after that, I will cover some demo regarding spec-driven development and all the phases that are inside the spec-driven development using Spec Kit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've used it and it's quite good. And so you share your screen and we can get started.
Yeah. Can you see it now?
Yeah, there we go.
Cool.
And the floor is all yours.
Yeah, so before I go to the demo, I want to briefly talk about why it's different from the vibe coded approach that we use in traditional AI assistant development. So when we use vibe coding, we prompt is go to the AI agent, and the AI agent produce the code, and it always gives in this iterative process that we review the code that the AI agent produce and suggest some changes. So you already see the disadvantages of that. First of all, it's context loss. Once you close this session, all the conversation will be gone. All the decisions that you made through this session also will be gone. So spec-driven development solves this problem in a way that, as you see, it has several more steps involved. First of them is intent, is capturing the intent that you want. Then you go ahead with specification, from specification to the plan, then from the plan to task, and then only you go ahead and generate implementation. What it gives to you is that all the decision documented, because spec-driven development generates a specification file that can be shared with different stakeholders. Let's say it's your PM or designer, and there is no context loss because all the decision will be documented before and you think about this in advance. Additional benefit of that is lower review burden. Let's say when you're doing the review of your code generated, it's hard to understand why this business decision was made in that code. With the spec-driven development, it can be flipped completely because what you share in your review is specification, and specification can be read as it's markdown file that's useful not only for AI, but also for the human as well. Additional benefit is if you don't specify it in your new session, it will be not recorded. So with spec-driven development, you provide this specification in your spec-driven development, and it will be used in the memory in each of your further iteration. So if ripping from how to implement something to raise the what and why, and your specification becomes a shared source of truth. Another different way to look into this spec-driven development, one of them is spec first, that you define your specification and you abandon that. It means you change the code directly. Another approach is spec-anchored approach, that you define the specification and you update the specification, update your code. And another, which I didn't use but could be useful for non-technical people, is a spec as source, and that you treat your specification as editable source. So you create a specification, you generated the code, and this process is always that you edit your specification and regenerate the code. Since it's hot topic nowadays, there are different spec-driven provider implementation, and you can select any provider for yourself. One of the most commonly used is GitHub Spec Kit or Kira. Another one that is interesting is Tessel. I'm not sure that I pronounce it right, but it uses this approach that I described before. It's spec as source. The difference between all of them, it's basically the structures that they define for the spec-driven provider, spec-driven implementation. For the GitHub, it could be GitHub Spec Kit. It can contain multiple steps, and for Kira, it will be different steps, so on. An additional thing that you need to consider for yourself is is it supported for greenfield or brownfield development, which basically means whether you can integrate it to your existing code base or not. In today's topic, I will be discussing about Spec Kit. Why I selected that? Because it has a large community based on the amount of stars that you see. It's supported in enterprise, supported by big companies like Microsoft. It can be extendable. It's community-driven and open source, and with open source, I mean you can directly modify the agent and definition, which I will show later. An additional thing, it has the integration with let's say, Claude or Gemini, or whatever you use. And yeah, I will, without further talking, let's go straight to the demo. So when you go to the GitHub folder, need to install this CLI tool into your device. And if you have some issues with this tool, you can ask AI to help you with that. Once it's done, initialization is pretty straightforward. If I copy this command and let's say open the empty folder, I'm providing the next parameter as project name. Then I can select any integration. Let's say in my case it's Copilot, and then I'm selecting a script type. In my case, it will be, let's say, PowerShell. Once done, it's already prompting you how you can continue with this spec-driven development. Next step would be these commands that you will be using quite often, or you can use one of the enhancement commands, like clarify, analyze, checklist. It also defines the structure in your folder. Let's say it's GitHub specify and VS Code. And how to understand these commands? Each of them represents a separate agent. So with Constitution, there will be a SpecKit Constitution agent. Since it's open source, you can read what this agent is doing. You can understand the idea implementation, and the scripts will be used inside your project as well. So each of the agents will be using one of the script in the specified folder to basically do the job for the spec-driven development. Additional note here is that once you initialize the project, usually you don't change the integration of the shell, because it would be harder to integrate, like you need to regenerate everything from scratch, all your specification definition. Right, so going back to the presentation, the core development loop would be using this command that SpecKit is providing. So you first start with the constitution, where you align your project rule and development principles, some non-negotiable rules in your folder, like in your project. Then you go to the specify. With specify, ideally you have already items like features for your implementation, and for each of the feature you run specify command. Once it's done, you can use SpecKit clarify to find gaps and ask questions, because why SpecKit shines also doesn't make assumption for you. If something is unclear in the specification, with this command, it will ask you some question, and iteratively you can integrate that, you can answer that, and it will be updating the specification. So no unclarity left. Once it's done, you go ahead with the planning phase. That's a place where you define the technical implementation. And once it's done, you go to the task to create a development task. Next step would be implementation, or you can go and check your implementation, like spec-driven development, with a checklist, which verifies that all the requirements are met, or analyze that. It's quite overlooked, but I found this one of the useful comments as well, because it compares your plan and task for the possible conflict, and additionally implementation, how it's aligned with the specification. So as I described in the Constitution, you decide all this decision in advance. Since all these steps takes a lot of time, I executed it before in advance, and providing here as example, one of example is SpecKit Constitution. And here I'm prompting to create application for Dublin chip food finder with principles. Let's say this will be a Next.js application, accessible UI, Prisma migration. I want to application to be testable, so on. If I go to my application and see what it generated this constitution.md file in the memory folder with the core principles and the development workflow, quality, gas, and governance. Since based on the location, as you can see, it will be used in the memory each time you use your next spec-kit command. So since it also will be in memory each time, you need to maintain this file with only relevant details. So don't push everything here because it will burn your tokens. Keep it minimal, and yeah, once it's generated, it's totally modifiable. So you need to review all of that. It's the focus is switching from implementation and validating the code to validating this constitution in the files that spec-kit gonna generate before going to the implementation. Next phase is an example of feature for the restaurant discovery and application foundation. You start with spec-kit specify. Here is important detail that you specify what, why, and outcomes, but you don't specify technical details. Because this document will be shareable with other stakeholders, let's say with your PM, so it should not include any technical details. And the result would be this features, acceptance criteria, and yeah, you share with your PM or whoever is involved in the project. Once verified, it goes and stays in the repository as a history, as decisions that were made during the specification phase of your project. If I go back to my project, I also executed it before in advance. It created this spec-md document, and if I share that in the preview, it created several clarification questions for me that I covered in a session with the question answers. It created several user stories, edge cases, requirement, functional requirement, key entities, and success criteria. It also has a section with assumption. And what this assumption means, that AI made some assumption during the specification phase. So before going straight to the planning phase, when I have this draft specification, I can execute spec-kit clarify, and it creates a session with me and interactively asks me this question regarding the assumptions that it was doing during the specification file. Also, one important thing to mention here is that the structure of the folder would be similar. And for each of the specification, it creates a feature branch. It would be following the same structure. At once you clarified all the question, there is also a gate tool that you can do is to verify checklist. Checklist is also a file in the checklist folder under specs, new spec file. And for instance, with the requirement document, let's say you have requirement no needs clarification market remain, all scopes is clearly defined, dependencies and assumptions identified. It's also a modifiable file. So for instance, if you don't need one of the requirements to be completed each time, you can modify that file and the AI will be not asking you to do that again and again. Yeah, once it's completed, you can go straight away to the planning phase. With the planning phase, that's where I'm providing the technical details. Let's say I'm providing my stack, that for the data migration, I will be using Prisma. For the test, I will be using white test. And it generates technical plan document. I also executed that in advance. So if I look to that file with the plan.md, it defines the branch and it defines the specifications that it's referenced. It defines the technical context, constraint, scale. It defines also project structure, since I initially said that there is no structure exist. So please create a structure for me. it will show example how the source repository structure would look like. And if you think about simple vibe coding and spec-driven development here, so it shows you what would be the outcome after you run this implementation phase. So it's painful to modify once this source code solution would be implemented by your AI agent from first attempt. Here you define and modify whatever you want to do, especially if your source code structure in your enterprise organization is already aligned. You modify it here in that file before doing any implementation and burning a lot of tokens. Next step would be to do spec task command, which splits this plan into several tasks, which I also executed in advance. And if I look into that, it would create a phased approach with the tasks specification. Additionally, what it does, it specifies the dependencies. And if dependencies are specified, that means with AI agent, if there is no interlinked dependencies between one of these tasks, I can implement this task in parallel, which speeds up the implementation. Additionally, if you see it, it creates a lot of tasks regarding testing. So by default, it follows test-driven approach as well. So if you don't want this to be in your new project, you need to specify that in the file in the beginning, the constitution file. Additionally, what you can do and how you interact with this file in the implementation phase. So I can in the session say that I want to implement and task 003. And instead of implementing everything, it will implement only that I specified. So where it's useful and what we should look for, we all need to strive to write better specification. So if we write some garbage, we will receive garbage, right? If we write a build a login page, it doesn't specify any details, so AI will do a lot of assumption. With spec-driven development, it will ask you a lot of questions, but if you write a strong specification, it has already clear action requirements, so this assumption would be definitely less. Additional things that spec-driven development probably not for everything. Why is not for everything? Because as you've seen, it's a lot of iteration, and if you just simply working on your custom project, it must be not necessary to do all the steps with specification, then writing this constitution, specification, planning, creating tasks, so on. So it slows down the iteration process. But in the enterprise integration, it might be very useful, especially if you work with a large code base and you need to align the specification. It's also not useful to use for the small bug fixes because, again, that's one process for simply fixing the bug. It's so it's not good to use SDD for everything. You decide for yourself when it's useful, but most of enterprise project would be following this approach. And yeah, you write the specification first, and one of the common mistakes is that people don't read the specification or the plan that it was generated. So ideally, you review all this plan and specification file in advance before going to the implementation, because all this decision will be taken into the consideration. And additionally, keeping the files small so you don't overload your agent with a lot of files. It's going to be added to the context and you burn a lot of tokens. That's all from me today. If you have any questions, please share. I will try to answer them. And Nicholas, you are not audible.
Yeah, sorry, I'm muted. So if anyone got any question, just shout it and put it in the chat, and then I'll ask Irina. Okay, so I've got one question. How does spec-driven development scale over multiple repos?
Yeah, that's a nice question. That's so you need to have an idea how to stitch this all specification together. So it's also a problem with any AI agent, especially like when we develop some microservice approach and we have different repos and code bases, we need some stitching file to stitch it together. So as far as I know, there is no support for that for now, but you can eventually at least create some files that will concentrate this file together, and you can use it as a reference. Let's say that, okay, I'm storing some other file in my other repository, and this is a code contract that will be used in that repository. That's how I would look into that.
Okay, so we've got another question. How to apply for event-driven microservice which has a common goal? By Keith Hacker Kuma.
If event-driven microservice has a common goal. I probably not really understand this question, but with any project, you start with a specification and follow the same structure that I described.
Maybe if you can rephrase that question, Salva. And then we'll get the answer to you. Okay. Sure. Okay. Just give you a minute and then. Anyone else got any question for Irina? Anders? Anyone?
And then there was one question earlier in chat about how to maintain a healthy spec over time.
Yeah, I didn't see that one.
Yes. So
there was some from
this one?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm somewhat skeptical that can be sensible over time, especially with small bugs, is won't just add way too much context.
So ideally, you don't use it for the small bug fixes because you don't need all this process, but how to maintain it, it's for the main decision. As I said, it's like you start with the large features. It's useful for the large features where you have multiple stakeholders involved. And how do you maintain them together? You have this spec kit checklist and analyze that could help you with maintaining your implementation and spec kit aligned.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think you answered this question about the larger ideas in the project, because you do with small checklists and branches.
Yeah, I think it also depends a bit on which kind of solutions you're building. So if for example, are building a solution where we have to constantly create new specs to evolve the solution, at least from my end, when a spec is outdated or not needed anymore, you can also simply just remove it from source. And also if details in from the spec and the development that turns out to be something that you want to keep over time, it's always possible to move it into the constitution as well to make sure that it sticks forever, if you like.
Yeah. So the constitution, I don't know, that's the same like instruction that files in Copilot. So it's quite similar.
I would say it could be. It's like
the context it gives.
rule when you use the spec kit, and then you can reference to that constitution from your Claude.md or agents.md or whatever, depending on how much, how often you want it to be stuck in your context window.
Yeah. So I've got this question from Phil. I'm not sure if we answered it. If you needed to swap LLM as module used during the process, that will cause issue, or is it seamless? You may have to rephrase this, Phil. Does anyone know what this means?
At least, as I said in the beginning, that if you define your integration and shell scripting, it's a good idea to keep it like that. Like ideally, maintain it consistent. Otherwise, you need to re-implement, reintegrate it. At least with scripting, for sure, I know that it's gonna fail with a different provider. Probably, like initialization is therefore is there in initial process. Like you define it first and you keep it.
Yep, and Daniel used it recently, so it's good to hear your experience. It should be fine to change the LLM or model during specification with a spec, because the spec should define everything. Yeah, that's correct.
It's fine and it's encouraged. I think if you run with the most expensive and best models for reasoning and everything all the time, you will have extreme development costs. So using a more advanced module during speccing and defining what you're supposed to do, and then switch to a cheaper model for the actual implementation.
Yeah, that's a good plan. Okay, so I think it answered Phil's question. He said thank you. Okay, so it looks like we've got quite a few questions from SpecKit. We got no more questions. So one more question from Self. I think he said it's a question that we couldn't answer before. He said, event-driven microservice like payment system, how write a spec for a group of repos, but each repo have different purposes.
I've done that once with a quite complex Azure infrastructure project, but in that case I used Visual Studio Code together with workspaces. So I just had all the different repositories wrapped up in one single workspace in Visual Studio Code, and then having all the context and the specs in a separate repo again. So since all the different folders are in reach for the harness, for example, Claude or Copilot or whatever harness you prefer, that will then be able to go and look at the different code in all the different resources, in the different folders. So if you then have a multi-repo microservices crazy architecture thing, you can use, you probably don't want to write the spec for yourself. That takes time, but I can use the LLM to just ask it to scan through the folders and repositories, understand the architecture, and draft the spec for me, for example. Then you get quickly up and running using the harness instead of sitting down and writing the spec from scratch yourself. So it's possible. It's all about what's in line of sight for the coding tool you're using.
Okay, yeah, that's correct. So we've got one last question. Chicken, I'm not sure who it is, at Chicken Nuggets. If the agent goes off spec halfway through implementation, how do you catch it? Do you have find out at review time, or is there something to checking out as it goes? Does anyone know this, Irina?
Like it follows the specification and it has a checklist. So it tries to verify itself, it runs this test. So I don't think it would happen. Right.
Okay. So not SSDD, but using codecs with context of all other repo can be helpful, but that kind of purpose, getting the LLM to understand problem with the spec. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so we got quite a lot of questions in Spec. It's quite popular. So I think you answer several question, and then check in his question as well. So if nothing else, thanks a lot, Arina. So you can stay behind to watch Ender session on cloud infrastructure with AI, and then let me put your screen on. Yeah.
Good.
And
Thank you.
yeah, so same like Arina. So do you want to just give us an overview of what your session's about before we dive in?
If I want to give an introduction.
Give an overview, yeah, like a small overview.
Yes.
Brief.
Yeah, an overview. Well, it's a bit broad. I think it's going to be a lot about how to use AI to maintain infrastructure as code and writing infrastructure as code correctly, and also how to use it correctly in existing workflows and also new ones for that matter, to be able to help use AI to build infrastructure as code from both scratch and from based on a template. So
okay.
Going through a couple of tools and how it's wired together and how it can help us in our day-to-day life when building cloud solutions.
Correct.
So I can start a bit. So it's going to be. It is not that different from Arina's session as well. We focused more on the spec-driven development details, but spec-driven development is also a part of how we are writing infrastructure as code these days. So I guess most know what infrastructure as code are already. So, but anyway, it's a way to define how the source, resources in Azure is going to look like when being deployed. So you get the code definitions to actually define how everything is going to look in Azure, from virtual machines to network to Microsoft Foundry accounts, storage accounts, and so on and so on. Everything defined in code. And this gives us the possibility to also check it into source control systems and having the possibility to redeploy the same infrastructure every time as you hit deploy. So it's been around, I think, since probably the start of cloud, maybe even before. And it's always also been a pain because it's a lot of text to write. It's a lot of details to understand. And it is in general a quite complex topic for many people. So that's why many also ended up just doing things in the portal instead, and which then ends up with actually losing control of what you actually want to manage in the end. So with AI, this just became even more important because AI can actually help us maintain all this infrastructure as code. AI is extremely good at writing code as long as you manage how it's supposed to do it, give it good instructions, and as we just saw, are setting the context correctly for the agent to actually develop the code. So I don't have too many slides, but I want to step through a bit of different processes and why it's so important today, and also give a couple of tips and tricks on how to get started. So feel free to shoot out questions as you go along. And if you're looking at this from a recording, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn or whatever if you want to discuss the topic more in detail. So just to give an example of an infrastructure as code. So this, I'm going to use Bicep today as the primary infrastructure as code language. And Bicep is a domain-specific language developed by Microsoft to help us write and maintain infrastructure as code and definitions in a language that also can have smart functions and be packaged as modules and so on to reduce the amount of repeating writing code. Because the goal isn't necessarily to let the AI write everything from scratch. I always recommend starting out with something that works or something that you maybe had from before, and then continue to develop from that. So one really popular language is Bicep, another one is Terraform. And in both cases, I also recommend starting out with Azure Verified Modules. So Azure Verified Modules are a set of modules developed by the community, but managed and supported by Microsoft. So the modules consists of something called resource modules and pattern modules. And a resource module is, in many cases, a one-to-one mapping towards resources in Azure. So a storage account has a module, a resource group have a model, a web application, a SQL server, and so on and so on. All these have, at least most of them, have also Azure Verified modules. And the benefit of a AVM module is that it's also aligned to well architecture framework. So well architecture framework defines a lot of standards that you want to follow when building solutions on Microsoft Azure. So it has 5 pillars. It's the cost optimization pillar, security, reliability, operational excellence, and performance efficiency. And this are helping us, guiding us into doing the right design of a solution to be able to have it running optimally. And this is where also the challenge becomes even more visible, because a simple solution like this one, which is a quite popular one with a web application and a Microsoft Foundry backend to be able to do chatting with a agent, for example, has a lot of components. You have the web app service, you have the key vault, the storage account, you have identity, you have networking, DNS, routing, firewalls. It's a lot of things to understand to be able to do correctly. And I think I can speak for most organizations out there that we expect today that with AI, especially, everything has to go a lot faster and be deployed extremely fast, because we have to get to market really, really fast. So that's where AVM modules also can help, because they help you configure these resources according to many of the recommendations from the well architecture framework. So you can focus more on building the solution by just importing and installing the different modules from AVM, instead of writing everything from scratch. So one of the challenges with this is, of course, you lose insight to how it's actually configured. So this is one of the things that the AI agent also can help us with understanding. So just asking about how everything is configured. So to demonstrate that, I have a repository here with a fairly simple application. It's a Bicep module that deploys Microsoft Foundry and a Azure Container App having the agent gateway service from agentgateway.dev that can be used to expose modules on Azure. So it has a lot of code. I think this one has like almost 500 lines, in addition to multiple other modules. So this one can this one is built as a Azure developer CLI template, which means that I can use this template to spin up new environments, or I can also, if I submit it to, for example, Git repository, I can create new installations based on this setup. So if you haven't checked out the Azure Developer CLI, I would really recommend having a check on that one. And it also has a lot of different other templates available that can begin used as a starting point to build out your solution. So if you were to install this template, it has a lot of infrastructure as code and scripts and whatever, which you either can sit down and read from scratch, or you can use, for example, Claude Code to actually understand what it is. So this is the nice thing about the agents, that you can actually use it to just ask for information. So, for example, give me a summary of what this project is about. So, quite simple question, and it starts out by reading the README and giving me a nice summary of everything that goes on, and that it's actually a bicep template with ACD, and it will deploy a Microsoft Foundry account and the agent gateway in a container app, and that it will deploy this into different resource groups as well. So instead of sitting down and reading and understanding every single line of this code, I can now more quickly become to build trust against new templates that you're just finding on the internet, because it's looking at something that could solve your problem that you're not sure. Then it's easy to use the LLM to actually ask about what it is and how you should use it. And also, if you hadn't used Azure Developer CLI before, you will hear and see quickly that there is something called ACD, and you can then continue investigating what that's about. So in this project, I've created an agents file. So this agents file is just a simple markdown file describing the layout of the project. So this becomes the first context that Claude will read and always use to understand how it's actually set up. So it gives me the layout. It explains the layout of the repo, and it's also explaining a bit about the conventions. I don't have a dedicated constitutions file here. I just have a couple of conventions set into the agents.md instead, to ensure that it will always do, as long as it's possible, do the right thing instead of going rogue and building something crazy from scratch that already exists as a Azure Verified Modules, for example. And if the AVM module are not able to do it, I've instructed it to also create the code in the modules file. So in this case, I have then gotten a code, a module for configuring the app registration in Enter ID, and also configuring the project for the Foundry account, because that's not something that the AVM module are able to do today. So these were built because in the early stages, I had an instruction saying that you're supposed to use AVM modules and use those first, and then create modules if they didn't exist. So most of the code in this template is written by an LLM, by just chatting back and forth and asking it to update the README and update the agents file as we go along to make sure that it's staying updated. It keeps an updated context between each iteration of developing. So this is important because, and I like this drawing from Anthropic, it describes how the context window is more or less empty and just based on whatever the module has basic training in, if you're using prompt engineering versus context engineering. So, so with context engineering, it will also use documentation available in the repository. It will be able to bring up additional tooling. It will use the memory file you have, and also different domain knowledge to be able to actually build up the right context for the LLM and making sure that it actually does what it's supposed to be doing. And in some repos, this can become extremely large, a lot of context, and you will actually just bloat your context window instead. So to be able to reduce the risk of that happening, another thing that you should definitely check out is the Azure Skills repo. So Azure Skills are a set of, it's actually a plugin, but it's a set of different skills and hooks and agents that are specialized to work with Azure resources. And these skills are essentially just a description of how it should work with, for example, resources in Azure. And the skill is having a name, and it has a description. So if you have this skill installed in a project or on a device where the context, the harness, AI harness has access to the skills folder, it will also include all the different skills with the name and the description. And if the job that is supposed to happen falls within the description of the skill, it will also read all this and start working according to the instruction it's giving. So that means you will fill up the context with specifications to ensure that the agent actually do what it's supposed to be doing. To demonstrate that, we can, for example, start a new conversation here and ask, do a well-architected review of this project. Use the code in the repo for the review. If everything goes according to plan, this will now identify that we have skills in the agents folder here that can help us do, for example, the reliability. If I was asking for reliability verification instead, it will also use that one, and also the different other skills if those fall within this the scope of the resources in this project. So we're just going to let this run a bit. It reads the README file, the agents file, it's read the bicep file. It's diving in to actually understand how everything is set up. So this normally takes just a few seconds. So I'll get back to it in a few ones just to see how it goes. But if it's LLMs, it's AI, so it might fail. But then I have a backup report available that we can look at. So with that said, I would also recommend having a look at the way to install this with APM. So APM is a package manager for agents, agent package manager from Microsoft, which helps you set up these projects really quickly if you have, for example, a set of skills and packages that you are fond of and want to use in multiple projects. So what this do, it is a simple YAML file with a configuration on which kind of skills it's supposed to install, which kind of MCPs it's going to install. And from there, you can then just run APM install whenever you want to have it deployed. So in my project here, for example, I have this configured to install the Microsoft Azure skills, and with targets of Claude, Copilot, Open Code. So it will actually deploy the skills in a way that it makes it available for multiple agents. So we got the report here. Let's see. So I think this is one of my absolute favorite things with AI as an architect. So being able to just ask it to do a full architecture review for me instead of me having to read through everything and understanding everything is really, really helpful. So in this case, this is a dev environment, so it's fine. Well, it's not fine. It shouldn't be. Postgres should not be open to internet, so it's not fine. Don't misunderstand. But it's at least how I chose to install it this time, because it's quicker for me to test it out. But it found the issue, and it tells me that this is definitely something that should be fixed. So it scans through all the security pillars, and the reason for this being able to answer so quickly is because the LLM has the Azure verified, the Azure well-architected framework reference documentation available in its training. So it's actually able to find configuration issues that should have been addressed. So after this report has been generated, I could choose to continue with, for example, Spec Kit, and ask it to create the spec for fixing all these issues using AI. And it will then create a plan eventually that can be used to fix out all the issues in my code. If you also have Claude, you could have it creating even better looking HTML versions of the report, so you can actually share this with, for example, a stakeholder or someone who wants to read up on it later on. So with that in mind, we can clear this one again. So is there any questions related to this? Please don't hesitate to fire off questions in the chat. I just also want to quickly show the ACD capabilities. So ACD has the concept of environments. So with ACD, we can create different environments based on the same code for and testing. So in this case, I have a dev environment, which is currently not the default one, and I have a demo environment, which is the default one. And whenever I use the ACD env to create an environment, all the configuration goes into a .environment file in the source code. And this is something you don't want to necessarily check into Git. Actually, it's discouraged to have the .azure file checked in at all. But what it does, it's bringing in all the different configurations I have in my Terraform file, the bicep file, as environment variables. And this happens thanks to the main.bicep, the main parameters JSON file. So it adds the capability of bringing these values in as environment variables instead. So while I'm using ACD locally to quickly develop and test, I can also then use this directly in my CI/CD pipeline afterwards to get it up and running. So for example, if I do ACD and help, we can see how I can then set up a new environment if I want to. So it's simply new, right? So ACD and new, if I'm able to type correctly, and new demo 2, for example. If I want to set it as the default, yes, I want, and it's up and running. So this brings up a fairly simple empty file that can be used to continue configuring the different environment variables and settings in the parameters file. So instead of doing all that on my own, I can ask the LLM to do it for me. So yeah.
So we got questions from Cass. So what's the difference between NPM and other package management, like NPM?
Yeah.
Or is it just Microsoft only or Markdown only?
No, so the NPM is for managing node packages, right? So it is fairly similar concept, but the agent package manager is purpose built to manage agents configurations across different projects. So it is basically two different solutions at all, but they have similarities. So with APM, you can then specify a APM.yaml file with the different targets and dependencies that you want, and it will then go install these agent skills in your project. Quite similar to NPM with package.json. It will then go install all the different packages that you needed.
Yeah.
But
I think the APM doesn't create agent skills. You have to write it.
If
it says use public skills.
No, you can use any. So this reference is sourcing automatically to GitHub. But if you can also specify any other Git repository.
Okay.
Basically.
So if you write custom skills, you can get to define it from there. Okay.
Correct. Good. So I'm not sure if that answered the question, but it is a manager for all the different agents and skills that you want to have in a solution. So back to my demo 2, I can then ask the LLM to look at the available parameters for this project and configure demo the let's see, ACD and demo 2 and element for me. So this will then go in and identify the main.parameters JSON file and understand how it should be configured and put everything into the file for me eventually. I can also, with ACD, do ACD env set, and with that, set the different environment variables as key value pairs, and that way configure the environment file as well. So it's a quite strong tool, and together with Azure Verified modules and the ACD kit and agent harness like Cloud Code, we can speed up the process of actually deploying solutions quite dramatically and with even more security and understanding of what it actually are, instead of writing everything from scratch. So it asks a bit of questions, use the same IP addresses, and use the default models that I want to deploy. And it should then go ahead and set these settings for me in the environment file. And with that set, I can then do ACD up, and that will go ahead and deploy the environment. So just to double check, ACD and list, we can see that demo 2 is the new default one. So if I do ACD up, this will then go ahead and start deploying all the resources. It's actually not super happy. It's annoyed by something. We can switch to another environment. I can debug this later and set, let's see, I think it's select or something. Yes. And do ACD up. It will go and deploy the configuration according to what's defined in the env file. Any more questions, by the way? while my voice is breaking up here.
No, no more. I wonder if this is good practice if you use like, is it good practice to push the .azure file for
No.
AZD? Like
No.
to GitHub repo, or you just like get ignored from using GitHub ignore?
You're supposed to handle the content of the Azure file folder as noise. So it's
so
just something you have in your local development, and to test that the different variables are set correctly, and then you can use you can transfer this information to whatever CI/CD platform you prefer, and having the same deployment going there. But no, you don't want to check in these .environment files in source control. So while that's deploying, that will then end up in Azure, and I can bring it over here so we can look at it. So this will then deploy the resources for the agent gateway, and it will deploy that agent gateway in a container so we can connect to it and have a look at it. And it's also setting up the gateway to connect into to federate with Microsoft Entra ID, so you get single sign-on and you're in and can actually look at the different modules that you have deployed to the Microsoft Foundry resource. So building everything from scratch for this one would probably take a couple of days if you're familiar with writing bicep modules and using Azure Verified modules and getting everything in place. But when using a LLM harness to write the code for you, for example, GitHub Copilot, you can get it up and running in less than half a day by just giving the right specifications, or even faster if you choose to base it off an existing ACD template that you can find in many places on the internet, and also there is a ACD template marketplace if you go to the documentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've got a question just for me. So what's the difference between your experience between the agent gateway and like the API gateway, APIM, that handles API requests for agents? What's your experience between those two?
I probably shouldn't say it, but the Azure API management gateway, I have not been able to actually have functioning as I want yet as an AI gateway. Currently, I think there's 3 different stories around how to use APIM as an agent gateway. So all this is moving extremely fast. But from an enterprise perspective, if you're large organizations with high requirements in all different angles, I would maybe go with the Azure API management gateway, and one of the first paths on exposing LLM backends through APIM. But if you have a small if you're a small organization or just need something up and running a bit quicker, agent gateway works fine.
Okay, so it's quite similar functionality, like you hide between the gateway, the API requests.
But both works as a fairly simple, thin gateway, almost transparent. But that was a bit. If you're not familiar with any one of them, both of them is going to be a pain in configuring the first time. So definitely use AI to navigate through how to configure the policies like this one.
Okay, and you can because I know APM takes long to probably difficulty. So probably agent gateway is probably easier because it's container apps.
And this is just one of many popular agent gateways these days. So quick Google will give you at least 3-4 fairly large community-driven offerings like agent gateway. But again, if you're enterprise and are willing to pay to get APM up and running and configured correctly, it's probably a better enterprise product.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you can just go directly to Foundry without having a agent gateway in between. That's entirely up to you. But this is just something I deployed during summer to be able to play around with it and understanding what it works. And of course, just see, for example, how is life, and ask GPT 5.6 Soul about that. Let's see if it works. It's probably the most expensive question I've asked today. But yeah, life can be messy, surprising, and beautiful. So it kind of summarizes how it is to write infrastructure as code as well. But beautiful, definitely, when using AI to help you guide it through. So I think that's some of the most important things. I can see the solution was built up in less than 4 minutes this time, using the configuration and everything that's set up in the ACD template that I have running here. And it's quite nice to be able to chat with an LLM to understand how everything is wired together. So yeah, I think I've been speaking for almost 40 minutes now as well. I'm not sure how I am on time.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah.
So if anyone got a question, just drop in the chat and then I can answer. And if not, you can just pop your, just give me a repo and I just tell everyone your repo name, see if they want to try it out, like deploy it. If you got this on GitHub.
Yeah, I'll probably get it up and running on GitHub quite soon. So it's a bit too much hard-coded stuff inside of my code now, and as you saw on the well-architected assessment, it's probably this exact template is not something I'll probably push and and put my name on. But as soon as I've fixed all the bad things in this infrastructure review, I'll probably get it up and running on.
Did you just do a dash report to generate this? I couldn't remember if you, because on cloud.
So this one is a command I ran earlier today, where for some reason Claude picked it up and figured out that it should create a Claude artifact for it.
Okay.
So this is something that Claude creates. If you're using GitHub Copilot, for example, you can also ask it to put the report into a nice looking HTML artifact, and you get something local. So it's a lot of different ways to get to the place you want to be. So I think the most important message I have is not to get stuck in just one small set of tools. Start exploring, asking a LLM and agents how you could improve your code or use new smart things to improve your code. I think that's one of the key messages, and working together with a AI solution instead of building everything from scratch or reading through tons of code to be able to understand it from scratch. You can just ask and have it explain how it's built.
Yeah, that's true. Also, it's quite nice because it's going to cloud like GUI as well, so it's public.
This report isn't public. I can't share it. It's running on my Claude.
Like an artifact. Like
a security report like this public.
Yeah.
Definitely not if it was a production element.
Yeah. So we've got no question.
Yeah.
So everyone seems to enjoy it. So if you got any question, you can just need to drop myself a message, or you can drop Anders a message on LinkedIn.
Yeah. And to follow up on Irina's session, the AVM team has also published a experimental article on how to do a specification-driven development, or spec-driven development, if you like, when building complete solutions. So this one is also a nice way to understand how to use AI together with infrastructure as code to get up and running quickly. So if you haven't checked them out already, check out aka.ms/avm and the offerings there within Bicep and Terraform modules.
Yep. Okay. Good. So we got no more question. Okay. And if no other question, thanks a lot, Arina. So I think Arina is off. Arina, have you got any question to Anders? I forgot to ask you.
No, thanks you a lot. It was useful. I think a lot of comments there.
Yeah, I think it was a mic. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so we got no questions. Any question, they can drop you a message on social media. Thanks a lot, Anders and Arina. So it was 2 amazing sessions. So it's tied to each other anyway. So the future, I would say, is spec driven. Like someone were mentioning open spec. So like, it's quite good.
Spec driven and context driven, and yeah, I think AI driven, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. If no other question, so yeah. So thanks a lot, everyone seems to join. So okay, no worries. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good one.